Hey everybody, this is Devin Townsend, and you are watching Brutalitopia.
Hey everybody, this is Mick again from Brutalitopia on a bit of a dry spell as of late in terms of interviews, but what a way to get back on track here. As you can see, I'm sitting next to Devin Townsend right here. Devin, how's everything?
Everything is good. Yeah, allergies are strong, so
Yeah,
I've got this kind of nasal thing going on
You
today.
seem a little less energetic than usual.
No, I'm energetic, man. My legs are crossed, or else I'd be doing a jig right now.
There you go. Now, we were just discussing that currently you're doing the tour in the U.S. here with Septic Flesh, Obscura, and Children of Bodom. Kind of a little bit of an odd fit for you in terms of musical styles and everything, but how's the tour been going so far?
It's a little bit more than a little bit. It's good, actually. I mean, I think that the people who support what I do are very supportive, right? And they tend to come out even if the shows are not with bands that they're usually into, and then, vice versa. There's some of the audience that are here for Children of Bodom or Septic Flesh or Obscura that, in a lot of ways perhaps have written off what I do as being just kind of, the oddball thing. But, we're a good band and it's good music, right? And I think that it helps us in some way to be put in a situation that you're kind of thrown into the fire in a certain way, and to come out of it with people accepting it, I think adds validity to what I'm trying to do right now in a heavy sense, right? It'd be nice after this to do a really mellow tour that would be kind of the oddballs on as well, and then hopefully it just makes sense.
I saw you were planning on maybe doing some acoustic shows, solely acoustic stuff.
Yeah.
Something you're realistically trying to set up and everything?
Yeah, we do 3 acoustic shows in England, and I've been doing them sporadically, and I really enjoy that, right? I think, again, with Deconstruction and Ghost being simultaneously released, I think I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I was trying to say. I mean, I know it, I just trying to articulate it is a little difficult, but I think one thing that really works in the favor of this simultaneous release is to do shows that are polar opposites, like a tour like this versus some very intimate acoustic shows, and then hopefully the result of that is that people will take from it that it's just expression, and neither of them are to the exclusion of each other. It's just two sides of the same coin, right?
There you go. Well, kind of going on that note of two polar opposite things, obviously, like you mentioned, you did just very recently release Deconstruction and Ghost simultaneously.
Sure.
Is that kind of, when we caught you last, you were kind of, just beginning to record stuff for it and everything. Is that, now that it's over, kind of something oh, I'm glad it's over, or is it something you still kind of reflect on thinking you could have done more with? Or?
Well, I mean, you can always do more. I heard something about production the other day where they say a production is never finished, you just have to abandon it, right? Yeah. And I think that's the truth, because it's just a rabbit hole if you just keep thinking that it's not good enough. I mean, it can always be better, right? But I think I really enjoy recording, right? I really enjoy making music, and a lot of this element of the job, touring, which we've been doing relentlessly, is it's a very interesting job, because on the surface it seems like you're on the road and you're playing music every night, which you are. But if you consider 40 minutes of my day is music, and the rest of it is, trying to find a clean place to poo, or or being on a plane, or getting stuck in a van, or getting stuck at a rest stop, or your gear's breaking down, or you've got 15 people on a bus that are all adults, and you're trying to figure out who gets to use the washroom, and who drank all the beer. And I mean, it's those elements of it is what makes or breaks a musician, I think. It's one thing to make music, which is a joy, and I love it, but really I'd say 8% of my day, if that is spent making music, and the other elements of it are just circumnavigating all the hassles, right?
Yeah. obviously a whole nother experience just outside of the
Oh
studio
yeah.
and everything.
So if I get a chance to sort of sit in the studio and drink some coffee and make music, I mean, shit, that's great.
It's the life.
Yeah, it is.
Going more specifically into the albums themselves, we'll start with Deconstruction first, just because obviously we're being on a heavier tour and everything. There you go. Kind of explain how the whole concept of having so many guests on the record came about, because it's very interesting how many like high profile people you actually like
Sure.
crunched onto that record. How did that really come up for you?
Well, I think what I was trying to do with Deconstruction was make a record that perhaps endorsed my connection to heavy music, and to underline that, to have all these people that are high profile and the orchestra and the choir and all that just really made it like there's no subtlety about me putting my foot back into it. It was like, we're very definitely going to do this, right? I think Deconstruction is a really, really important record, right? For me, of course, and for the project. But I mean, I'd hazard to guess maybe even a little further than that. I think it's a really cool statement, and it's supposed to be a serious record, believe it or not, even though there's all these things about it. Yeah, but I mean, it's just like, as soon as it came out, people were just like, oh, you released a comedy record. And I'm like, what? It's not at all, right? And they're like, yeah, well, you got a song about cheeseburger, and there's a guy taking a shit, and there's like all this sort of stuff, and people are just like, oh, it's funny, the lyrics are ridiculous. And I'm like, it's not at all, actually. It's supposed to be dead serious. It's like, I mean, of course, it's like, if you're not familiar with what I do, and in the context of the 4 records, I could totally see that, right? And I definitely don't like begrudge people for that, but I'll stand too that it's supposed to be the way it is, and it's supposed to be stream of conscious, and it's supposed to sound the way it does, and it's supposed to be chaotic. It's supposed to have that sort of childish element to it. It's supposed to, because the whole purpose of Deconstruction is like getting to the root of who I am, not only as an artist but as a person, and try and uncover some of those malignancies that in the past have led me to artistic decisions that I haven't been comfortable with. And in order to do that, sometimes you got to go into your process to a point where you have to explore the childish things. You have to explore the puerile things. You do. And I think that, I read a quote the other day where they say people who are like serious all the time, that's like a mask for self-importance, right? Where your inability to kind of just look at the absurdity of it all is like, and I don't know if I subscribe to it, but it made sense to me when I was pissed off, right? That, having an unwillingness to kind of recognize this whole reality is absurd, in lieu of it being this super serious, hyper, whatever, doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And so what I needed to do with Deconstruction was really make that point.
How did you craft the music kind of catering to the styles of the people you're bringing on? Because I noticed, like, with some tracks, like for Sumeria, for instance, like when I heard Joe come on the track, it's like, this sounds like a Gojira kind of song in a way. Did you kind of craft that with the people you're bringing on, or was there... To
a certain extent. I mean, I knew a lot of these folks, and so I would write riffs and say, oh shit, that sounds like a Gojira riff, I wonder if you'd be interested in singing on it, right? Because then I can get away with actually using a riff like that, right? And it was like in Planet of the Apes, where it's a Meshuggah riff. So I said, man, how am I going to get away with this? So the lyrics are like, oh, okay, well, I'm ripping off Meshuggah. And Fred's on the other song, right? So it's like, I think that my reason for getting these people on there was I needed to make the statement with Deconstruction as one of like, well, I have control over this. In the past, when I was making heavy music and I was on drugs or drinking or whatever, it really had control over me, right? And then it led me to artistic decisions that I spent a lot of years wondering if it was just a deficiency within myself, that maybe I'm just a bad dude, right? And maybe like left to my own devices creatively, I'm always going to hardwire myself to decisions that are going to affect me in a way that I'm not comfortable with. So with Deconstruction, I really wanted to say, okay, this time, I've been sober for a long time, right? I'm going to do it again, and this time it's going to be more complicated, and it's going to discuss the root of what the problem with it was through all its ups and downs and stupidities and glories and fears and all that. And then once I realized I had control of it, I was like, well, you know what, just to underline this, let's get all these singers on there. And then once they were on, I was like, well, you know what, let's put an orchestra on it. Let's put let's get it mixed by this dude, and let's make the statement that by the end of the record, it's like, okay, we clear now, I've got
Right.
control over this, and given my druthers, I choose to do something else with my life, right?
That was another interesting point that I was going to make a point to talk about, was kind of the orchestration with, like, the whole record. You kind of made it, like this very grandiose kind of thing. Like, was that always something you kind of wanted to do in the back of your head?
Yeah, and
or-
that's why there's the whole cheeseburger metaphor on it, because I wanted to make something that was so epic
But so simple, kind of. At the same
and so useless too, right? I wanted to really make a point that through all this chaos and intensity and trying to figure it out and all this, it's like at the end of the day, man, it's like life is really about the brass tacks of it, and I think a lot of it's like intellectual masturbation. The more you try and like figure out infinity, I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous, right? You can't. But I think a lot of people like enjoy that that process, because I think it makes us feel important, right? So I wanted to make a record that was so epic, and then when finally it's like it's revealed what the record's about is something that's ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the last couple of songs, the character's just like, well, I'm ashamed, I had no idea that I was going to be made to look like such a fool here
Right.
through this process. All this drama that I've invested into trying to figure out my world has ended up being something. Hey, I'm a vegetarian, right? So it's like, well, here it is. It's a cheeseburger, and he's like, yeah, well, where does that leave me, right? But I mean, again, it's like, and again, so when I put it out, of course, people are going to say, oh, it's stupid, and the lyrics are dumb, and it's like, childish, or it's supposed to be a comedy record, but it's not. It really isn't, right? But I'll stick to that and let other people decide whether or not it works for them.
You're always
right?
going to have haters, so that's just,
Oh, yeah,
it's just the name of the game.
Totally. And it's not like I think that there shouldn't be.
Right.
But I mean, I guess my only thing is I've really wanted to be clear about what I'm doing, because in the past, specifically when I was smoking a lot of weed, I'd write things that I couldn't explain, and it became problems for me in a certain light, because people would misinterpret it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when I seem to be vigilant about saying, hey, it's not supposed to be funny, it's it's not because I'm trying to defend it, because really, like it, hate it, doesn't really matter, right? But I just don't want it to be misinterpreted, whether or not you like it, right?
There you go. Well, also, obviously now touching on the lighter side of what you released, Ghost, what really, did you have that notion of like releasing those two at the same time, or did like one come before the other? Because like we had mentioned before, they're like extreme polar opposites
Sure,
of
yeah.
each other in terms musically.
Well, all four of these records were written about 4 years ago, right? When we had the baby, right? Like, my wife and I had a baby 4.5 years ago, and I quit smoking and quit the band and cut my hair off and moved, and people died, and just, like a lot of things, right?
Right.
So I wrote 80% of this stuff all at the same time. So none of them came before or after each other. I just, every time I'd sit down, I just let it flow, and then it sort of found its way into four very distinct categories, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I chose to release Ghost and Deconstruction together at the same time is because I wanted, if I had just released Deconstruction, I think the reaction would have been, well, this is where he's going. It's like reconnecting with the strapping thing, but it's obviously not strapping, and then that would have been the taste that people are left with, right? But I released Ghost as the fourth record because that's ultimately where I'm at in life right now, is that type of music. But I think with the fan base that I've had and the amount of kind of turbulence that I've subjected my audience to, I think that if I had just released Ghost on its own, it would have ostracized people who wouldn't perhaps have known how I ended up there. So Deconstruction was important for me to be able to say, well, yeah, I went through that so I could arrive here, right? Mm-hmm. And like even the names of the record, like, Key is supposed to be, life force, right? So basically you're born and then addicted. It's like, it's like your personality is, who we are as people. Like, we don't exist, but we get these personalities based on, comforts and things that we find, addictions, right? In one way or another. Mm-hmm. And then to go through that deconstruction, it's like, well, let's take it apart. Let's get back to the root of it, right? And then Ghost, I mean, the reason it's called Ghost is because, yeah, it's like who we are on a soul level is like it's everybody's the same thing, mm-hmm. right? But the ghosts of all those addictions and everything is what defines us, I guess. So I wanted to make a record at the end that had no real metaphor, no real irony, just like, a mellow statement, right?
Right. And just kind of going on that more, like, was Ghost kind of in comparison to Deconstruction? Is it kind of more, like you said, kind of a representation where you are kind of currently? Like,
Oh, yeah.
Because now that the cycle's over and everything with the 4 records, is that kind of where you are right now in terms of like moving forward, or what do you think's next for Devin Townsend kind of musically?
Oh, well, musically, I'm going to let it decide for itself. I've got a bunch of ideas, but I've got no desire to push it right now. I think more than anything else, it's like I've spent so much time trying to be clear about all these things, and I think because it was written 4 years ago, even Ghost isn't a direct representation. What do I like? I mean, I like dance music, I like folk music, I like acoustic music, I like playing bass, I like orchestral thing, I like comedy, I like a lot of things, right? Ghost, more so than where I am at in life right now, although it's close, I admit, was just the way to summarize this kind of process that I felt it necessary to write about with these 4 records, right?
Is it going to be, do you think, from now on just Devin Townsend, or is it going to be kind of like another like
Devin Townsend
cycle
experience? No, I don't know, man. I mean, it's like, I think I've always thought of it as being just like the height of arrogance to call it your own name. And I mean, when I started strapping, man, like, I mean, that was Devin Townsend too. I mean, I wrote all that stuff right up till, we started doing SYL, and, maybe a bit more contribution from Gene or what have you, is like, Jed ended up writing a song here and there, right? But when I started strapping, it was me in my bedroom, same way as I was with Ghost, right? Like, it's the same, City was written the same way that Key is. So, but at the time, I didn't want to call it Devin Townsend. So I thought Strapping a Lad, then it's like it's a cool name or whatever. You can SYL or Strapping or whatever. Same, Ocean Machine or Infinity, all these things. I've always had a real hang-up about calling it my own name. So when I did the Devin Townsend Band, at least I could sort of be flanked by guys as a band, right? And then the project, right? So I suspect that in the future it'll just be my name, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Well, seems like a pretty sound
I'm a slow learner, man. It takes me a long time to make a decision, right?
What do you think is in store for, I guess, the project, right now?
I like that name. We'll call it the project.
Just the project.
Yeah.
What is in store for you guys past this tour currently?
What's
in the immediate future, do you know? Or?
We're on tour until, I think, Hell Freezes over.
So pretty much always.
Yeah. Yeah, we. I think our last date of this year is December 17th, and man, we're like gone. I don't know. I got a family and parents and all this sort of
Normal
stuff.
stuff.
Well, the thing is, it's like it's one or the other. It's like a very, very strange life, because in order to do this effectively, for me, I've got to keep sober. I've got to keep my grounding. I got to keep my feet on the ground. And what usually has allowed me to do that is home and family and recording and my folks and all that sort of thing. But in order to do this, it takes you away from that, and then you neglect that as a result of it. So, I think everything's a lesson in a way, but I guess the one that is the most profound right now is like, well, you can't rely on anything for comfort, because it's an illusion, right? So you've just got to find the best way to make do with where your circumstance is and deal with problems as they come up, right? So that's where I'm at.
Well, there you go. Well, just to kind of leave on a much lighter note here, since you probably have stuff to do. But we
take some allergy medication.
Yeah. Get sedated before the show.
Wow.
But we've been talking about very profound things, and we're in this party room with a huge Buddha statue there. So I mean, just kind of leave on a kind of enlightening note, maybe for some people that have been wondering, listening to Deconstruction and everything. Obviously, cheeseburgers was a big thing. So for you, Devin Townsend, what is your ideal cheeseburger?
My ideal cheeseburger. Oh gosh, a carrot. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm interested in like becoming a better person or whatever, but I don't think I'm that smart, and I don't think I'm anywhere near close to any sort of enlightenment, man. I just like I'm
not gonna find that perfect cheeseburger.
No, I don't think I'm ever gonna find it. But I think the quest is pretty important, and if I had one thing to leave people with, it would be worse shit has happened to better people.
And that's the way we left off our first interview.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been another Brutalitopia exclusive interview, everybody. We're, of course, here with Devin Townsend. Devin, thanks so much.
Thanks, buddy.
Always a pleasure.
You too, man.